Tiny silver baby bracelet landed on the hardwood floor before anyone heard me cry out. It rolled beneath the gift table, catching the afternoon light, while every conversation in the room stopped at once. My mother's voice was the only sound left. "We only need one grandchild," she shouted, pointing toward my sister. "Hers, not yours." No one moved. I remember seeing my sister's lips curl into the smallest smile, as though something she had imagined for years was finally happening. Then my mother stepped forward and struck me hard in the abdomen. For a heartbeat, I couldn't breathe. The room tilted. Someone caught my shoulders before I reached the floor. The decorations still hung from the ceiling. Pink and cream ribbons drifted gently beneath the air conditioner, while guests stared in disbelief. A half-cut cake sat untouched beside wrapped presents, looking absurdly cheerful against the silence that had settled over everything. My closest friend, Nora, knelt beside me. "Don't move," she whispered. Her voice was steady. Mine had disappeared. Someone in the back of the room was already calling emergency services. Someone else quietly guided my mother toward the front door before she could say another word. The ambulance ride felt strangely peaceful. The siren faded beneath one thought that repeated itself over and over. Please be all right. I wasn't thinking about my mother or my sister. Only the tiny heartbeat I hadn't even heard yet that morning. Hospitals have a way of measuring time differently. Every minute stretches. Every expression on a doctor's face becomes its own language. A nurse tucked a warm blanket around my shoulders while another adjusted the monitor across my stomach. Nobody offered false reassurance. Nobody rushed. They simply worked. Finally, after what felt like an entire season compressed into an hour, the room filled with a rapid rhythmic sound. My baby's heartbeat, strong, steady. I closed my eyes. The first tear of the day arrived only after I knew that sound would continue. The physician pulled up a chair. "The baby appears stable," she said gently. "That's encouraging. But because of the trauma, we'll need to monitor your pregnancy much more closely." I nodded. Relief and fear can exist together. I learned that afternoon they often do. 2 police officers arrived later. They asked careful questions. Not once did they suggest I was responsible. By then, several guests had already volunteered statements. People who had remained politely silent through years of uncomfortable family gatherings had finally reached the point where silence felt heavier than truth. I didn't hear every statement they gave. I didn't need to. For the first time, I wasn't carrying the story alone. Lying awake that night, I remembered birthdays where my achievements quietly disappeared beneath celebrations from my sister. Report cards that earned polite smiles while hers earned framed photographs. Even as adults, I kept believing one more accomplishment might finally make my mother look at me with the same pride. Pregnancy had changed something inside me, not because I became stronger, because someone else now depended on the choices I made. Some doors could no longer remain open simply because they were labeled family. Months that followed were careful ones. More appointments, more scans, more waiting. Nora attended nearly every visit. Neighbors dropped off meals. A retired teacher from next door knitted another pair of baby booties after hearing what had happened. A little silver bracelet someone had intended as a shower gift stayed in my bedside drawer. I couldn't explain why I never wore it. I only liked knowing it was there. My mother sent a letter 3 months later. No excuses, no attempts to rewrite what had happened, just uneven handwriting covering 4 pages. She admitted that years of comparing her daughters had become something darker than she had ever wanted to acknowledge. She wrote that envy, fear, and misplaced loyalty had slowly become habits she stopped questioning. She asked for forgiveness. She did not ask to visit. I folded the letter carefully and placed it inside a box without answering. Some words deserve to be read. Not all require an immediate reply. My son arrived on a rainy October morning. When the nurse placed him in my arms, the hospital room became impossibly quiet. His fingers wrapped around one of mine with astonishing certainty. He had no idea how much noise existed outside that moment, and I promised myself he wouldn't inherit it. Several weeks later, I hung the tiny silver bracelet from a wooden hook beside his crib. Not as jewelry, as a reminder. Visitors sometimes ask why it wasn't tucked safely into a keepsake box. I always smiled. It reminds me what survived. They usually nodded without asking another question. I still think about that afternoon sometimes, not because it defines my life, because it divided it. There was the woman who kept hoping love could be earned, and there was the mother who finally understood that love worthy of a child never asked them to compete for the right to exist. My family never returned to what it had been. Some distances remained. Some conversations never happened. Some wounds healed into quiet scars instead of disappearing. But every evening when I close the nursery door and hear my son breathing peacefully in his sleep, I know something important ended that day at the baby shower, not hope. The belief that cruelty must be inherited. That legacy stopped with me.